The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100, we start here with SPY. As you can see, we're still making these lower highs in the shorter term, but on the higher time frames, you still look solid. You're getting back below 573 and 575 as well, with a strong rejection here Friday in the morning, then proceeding all the rest of the afternoon, kind of coming back down. We saw tech also showing a lot of weakness. There's also a few things going on. We'll go into Nasdaq really quick so you can see. But again, coming into kind of previous lows here, bottom of that previous range here, 20,300, rejecting. And I want to make this very clear as well. You know, we're on the 1 hour here, but we'll go like to the 4 hour so you can see a little bit more clearly. All right, let's actually choose the 2 hour here, so it's really easy to see. Okay. So obviously over the past few weeks, you were just trending overall here in this range, basically going back into September all the way through, I mean, essentially the end of October, right? You can just see that action. You were sitting most of the time here, some false breakouts, but majority of the time spent there. So if you start coming back into this range and rejecting, it's a bad look in my opinion. Now we also have election day coming up, I believe on Tuesday, the 5th, which is kind of crazy that that's already here. And this is where things also get very interesting because everyone remembers, I even covered it here a little bit, the Trump leading on the betting polls, right? The betting odds and polls there. And then we really didn't have polls coming out yet. But again, when we look at what's happening now, obviously Harris takes a massive, massive swing over the weekend back in favor. And I wanted to highlight as well, we talked a lot about this going into like to the Hillary election and how things were drastically different there as well, right? But going into the election, I think it was 2016, you saw Donald really, really low on the polls, you know, no real chance of winning, skyrocketed back up. So again, I wanted to say, like, people still need to vote. people have to get out and vote. The numbers don't mean anything unless we get to the end of the day. And you know, one has more votes than the other. So we'll go into that. So again, that's what we're kind of seeing happening with the market. Like you go into something like Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin is actually one of the best metrics to look at who's winning this election and like what's happening here. Because in my opinion, if Trump wins, Bitcoin's incredibly, incredibly bullish, right? And just my personal opinion, right? And we look at this action over the weekend, like since Harris's polls have shifted, right? You know, since Thursday, really, just Bitcoin's getting nuked here. So worth mentioning what I'm watching, paying attention to that, and I'll give you more of a viewpoint on how I think each presidential candidate benefits, hurts the market going into later this week. But I will say, like, you'll probably get an initial pop or some volatility no matter what, whoever wins. And then I expect most of the positives to come end of November, going into December as well. But it's also worth mentioning VIX is still very high as well. And again, I don't like to chart VIX, but I'm just telling you VIX is still sitting at a very high level. The higher VIX is, the more the back and forth that volatility ensues, meaning we typically don't just get a clean cut direction either to the downside nonstop, right, on the S&P, or to the upside, right, when VIX is elevated like this. So be watching for the whipsaws. It's going to be a little bit in my opinion. Now, the other part here, too, is you look at equities over this past week. And I don't think, like, earnings started off really good. And then they kind of finished off pretty terrible, right? Apple didn't really do too much. Meta was okay. Microsoft, the call wasn't that amazing. So, again, things that we're looking at here. So as long as we're below 573, in my opinion, these are your two major levels. If you're not following on Twitter, I recommend doing so. I'll have charts going out again today. I'm doing more of these chart requests as well. I just was really busy. I got kind of sick over the weekend. So again, make sure you have your chart requests. If it's a trash stock or something I've already covered, I'm not going to go over it. But yeah, anyways, you can do those there. Twitter link is down below. But what I will say is, I think it's likely that we come down to 565, 567, this bottom of this range, back to, July previous highs. It's not ideal, but it seems very likely at this point. You go into QQQ as well. You're back to the illiquid zone, back to the downside. You made a lower high here. You start getting back below 47 and holding, in my opinion, as well. The downside starts to look more and more likely. You have room down to 477, a little bit lower than that as well. But that's definitely where I'd be starting to look for if we start seeing increased selling. It's about 10 points as well there. So again, a few of the points I'm watching, a few of the levels I'm watching. You can also see where we kind of bounced previously, right about there. As you can see at 484. So what I'm watching and what I think people should be watching in this week. And I think right now I'm leaning more towards downside going into this week right now. Very important to understand that. You also do have a Fed meeting as well on Wednesday. So that's also worth mentioning. You'll have a rate cut most likely coming in on Wednesday, the day after Election Day. So that should also be pretty fun. We'll go over that as well. Expecting a 0.25 cut. I'll have more of a deeper dive into that as well. Also going into Dow. Dow was another really interesting part here. If we look at higher time frames primarily. And I think right now, as we're getting these drops and you're making lower highs, yeah, I have like day trading levels that I'm watching, don't get me wrong. But what you really need to do is go out to like the daily and you need to identify where you're bouncing, where you're trying to find buyers right now. Because this is going to give you the biggest answer. So if you start getting like continuation in a specific direction, you have to start zooming out to understand where you're actually going to start finding those buyers or those sellers. And so right now you can clearly see going into here on Dow, little previous highs back from, again, July. That's going to be the going trend here, July, September right there, the double top we broke out. That's what you're trying to bounce right now. So as long as you hold above 41,900, I think you look good on Dow. But it's worth mentioning as well, you know, Nasdaq wasn't running to all-time highs during this period. It was SPY and the Dow. And it's important to realize if the Dow gets weakness here, that I expect SPY to also get weakness as well. And this is going to be a monster level. Like, you have to understand that. Like, look at the action that you had when you came and retested it here. When buyers showed up there at that level, you shot up. Like, you literally went up like another 1,000 points on Dow. So crazy to think about that. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you start to lose this level, retest and push back down, like highly likely you're looking for that 200 SMA down here, or you're looking for that previous high back here as well. So again, not a good look either way. What I'd be watching for, so very big level here on Dow. I think, again, like ES is in danger at this point, in my personal opinion. ES is already at that July high, breaking down below it and rejecting. Again, it's different than the SPY, so that's why I always say futures are very key. And you can see here, if you go into futures here, that you're obviously operating below that level now. Strong rejection. You're finding support from those supports that you found back in July. That's worth mentioning here on ES, or in September, I'm sorry. Like, you found a lot of support down here, but so far this candle, not a good start. So again, you have election day Tuesday, then you also have what's happening with the rate decision going in on Wednesday. So big week across the board. But so far, candles don't look good. I'm going to let you know that right now. Stocks I'm looking at, again, I'm watching Apple as long as it's below like 223.5 to 224. I think Apple looks very weak. Below 220, I'd be looking down to 215 to 214. That's my personal target that I'd be looking at. So again, you can do whatever you want. It's down closer to here. Very likely a little swing lows you have back here in July. There's a lot of levels I can go into, but I just don't want to spend the whole time on one stock. Going into Microsoft as well. Very weak off of 414. We said that if you bounce, that's where you're going into. Back below 408, I'm looking down into 404, 405, give or take. We'll be watching that. AMD, the weakest semiconductor out there, in my opinion. Extremely weak. You start getting below 141, I think you're looking, I mean, this could start getting really ugly down to 135, 136. So you got to be watching AMD as well. Looking very weak here. NVIDIA, again, going trend. You're seeing a lot of weakness. NVIDIA, I wouldn't really be favoring the downside unless you start getting below 133, 134. Then you're looking for 130. But again, if you get back above 136, I think the upside is likely. And I still think NVIDIA is one of the best looking names out there. I'll let you know that right now. Tesla, this was looking really good. You kind of came into our 274 level up there. Can never break above to go to our next target of 300. If you start to hold below 250, I think it's likely you try to get a push back into your 200 SMA down here as well, going into around 236, 237, give or take. That's your 200 weekly. That's going to be a pretty big support. If you get below that, you're looking for the gap fill back to the downside. So again, what I'm looking at there, no reason to overcomplicate it. Meta has been one of my favorite names overall. Really simple trade here, in my opinion. You can actually trade it both ways. You break below basically 562, 561. You're looking for a downside into 544. You break above 573.8, 573.7. You're looking for a push into 583, possibly even higher there as well. Again, simple chart. No reason to overcomplicate it. Amazon, great earnings, but in my opinion, Jeff Bezos continues to sell at 200. So again, I'm looking for a retest back into 195.3, the reaction to that previous high you had back here on September 24th. The reaction will be key. If buyers step in, it's likely you push back up. So we'll be going over that as well. I think you're going to have multiple days for these pullbacks on some of these names. So again, it sets up really well with after the election day and after you get the rate cut as well to see kind of how we react there. Another one of my favorite names on Google is Google. It's been above the neckline. Right, you had your inverse head and shoulders, right? Holding above 168.5 looks good. One of my more bullish names. Would be watching them for sure. Looks really good. So definitely watching that one as well. AVGO, semiconductors, again, it's just a lot of weakness, man. If you start getting back below 165, 166, this might get destroyed. So again, A lot of caution for myself going in this week. I'll have more charts going up as well, like I said, on Twitter. So make sure if you have questions, things like that, guys, I try to make as much free content as possible to avoid like people like having to pay for stuff. And if you are interested as well, we do have spots available, I believe, in Discord. You can check it out. But again, the link is down below if you're interested. It's all there for you. So have a good one, traders. I will see you tomorrow. Post your questions on Twitter. Again, see you guys. Have a good one. Stay safe and have a good weekend.